In a dramatic escalation ahead of anticipated peace talks in Istanbul, Ukraine reportedly launched a large-scale attack aimed at crippling the Russian Air Force's capabilities. The operation, which Ukrainian officials claim caused extensive damage to Russian bombers valued at around $2 billion, underscores the high stakes as both nations prepare for discussions aimed at establishing a ceasefire. The Ukrainian strike comes amidst ongoing military operations, with both sides intensifying their aerial campaigns against each other. The timing of Ukraine's offensive coincides with the arrival of delegations from both countries in Istanbul, where they are set to explore potential avenues for peace following 3 years of conflict. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has stated that Ukraine's delegation, led by Defense Minister Rustem Umerov, will prioritize a complete and unconditional ceasefire as well as the return of prisoners and abducted civilians. This initiative has been spurred by U.S. President Donald Trump's encouragement for a swift resolution to the war. However, skepticism lingers regarding the sincerity of Russia's willingness to negotiate. Russian President Vladimir Putin has indicated that while Moscow is open to discussions, it will only accept terms favorable to its strategic goals. Recent statements from Kremlin officials reaffirm aspirations for territorial expansion beyond the areas currently under their control, threatening further military action if peace talks do not yield results. In the wake of Ukraine's airstrike, reports emerged of significant Russian military activity, including a deadly missile strike on a Ukrainian army training facility that resulted in the deaths of at least 12 soldiers. This incident highlights the ongoing toll of the conflict, as both nations continue to exchange attacks in a bid to assert their dominance in the region. On the Russian side, officials have reported infrastructure damage from what they describe as terrorist acts, including the collapse of 2 bridges in regions bordering Ukraine. While Russia has not directly attributed these incidents to Ukraine, the pattern of sabotage has raised concerns about the security of transportation networks critical to military logistics. As both sides ramp up their military efforts, the dynamics of the conflict remain fluid. Reports indicate that Russian forces have recently made ground advances in Ukraine's border regions, particularly in Sumy, where they have amassed significant troop strength. Kyiv, in response, has not only engaged in counteroffensives but has also initiated drone strikes deep within Russian territory, targeting airbases that serve as launch points for attacks against Ukraine. The situation highlights a dangerous interplay of military action and diplomatic maneuvering. As Ukraine seeks to negotiate from a position of strength, the potential for miscalculation remains high. The forthcoming talks in Istanbul, facilitated by Turkey, will test the resolve of both sides and could either pave the way for a long-awaited ceasefire or further entrench the conflict. With both nations poised for further military engagement, the outcome of the Istanbul talks may significantly influence the trajectory of the war. Observers will be closely monitoring developments in the days ahead, as the stakes have never been higher for both Ukraine and Russia. In a significant escalation of the ongoing conflict, the Russian Defense Ministry has confirmed drone attacks targeting 5 military airfields across the country, attributing the strikes to the Kyiv regime. The attacks occurred on June 1, 2025, and hit airfields in regions including Murmansk, Irkutsk, Ivanovo, Ryazan, and Amur. Initial reports indicate that while some drone incursions were repelled, the assaults resulted in considerable damage, with fires igniting and affecting several aircraft. Fortunately, the ministry reported no casualties among military personnel or civilians. According to a statement from the Russian Defense Ministry, the drone strikes were executed using first-person view FPV technology, underscoring the increasing sophistication of unmanned aerial vehicle UAV use in this conflict. The ministry claimed that those responsible for the terrorist attack had been detained, although details about their identities or affiliations were not disclosed. The Russian narrative suggests a growing concern over the capabilities of Ukrainian forces, particularly in executing such coordinated strikes on strategic military assets. The incident has been linked to a broader offensive by Ukraine's security service, which reportedly launched a special operation dubbed Pavutina Web that had been in the works for 18 months. Early estimates from Ukrainian sources indicate that as many as 40 Russian aircraft were damaged during the drone offensives, marking one of the most significant strikes against Russian military infrastructure since the conflict intensified. The drones were reportedly launched from lorries parked at a petrol station, highlighting the adaptability and ingenuity of Ukrainian tactics. This attack is a part of an ongoing tit-for-tat escalation, with Russia having conducted its largest drone strike on Ukraine just days earlier, unleashing 355 drones in a single night. The timing of these strikes coincided with political tensions, notably the growing frustration expressed by U.S. former President Donald Trump towards Putin's aggressive military strategies. Trump's comments, which included criticism of Putin's actions as needless killing, reflect a broader international concern about the escalating violence and humanitarian implications of the conflict. As the drone warfare intensifies, the strategic landscape of the conflict continues to evolve. Analysts suggest that the increasing use of UAVs could redefine military engagements in the region as both sides leverage technology to gain tactical advantages. The implications of these developments extend beyond immediate military objectives, potentially influencing international diplomatic efforts aimed at resolving the conflict. Looking forward, the situation remains fluid and the potential for further escalation looms large. The ongoing military actions could provoke a more substantial response from both sides, complicating any diplomatic resolutions. As such, the international community watches closely, anticipating how these developments will shape the future of the Russo-Ukrainian conflict. Tensions are escalating as U.S. senators increasingly express concerns over Russian President Vladimir Putin's intentions regarding Ukraine. Recent statements from lawmakers underscore a growing urgency for the United States and its allies to impose swift and decisive sanctions on Russia. The situation is further complicated by a series of tragic incidents in Russia, including the collapse of 2 bridges in regions bordering Ukraine, which resulted in at least 7 fatalities and dozens of injuries. Senators have highlighted that Putin's steadfast refusal to engage in meaningful peace negotiations indicates a preparation for prolonged conflict. "We must act fast to prevent further escalation," stated Senator Marco Rubio, emphasizing the need for a robust international response. The political climate suggests that U.S. lawmakers are motivated by the desire to deter further Russian aggression, particularly as reports indicate that military activities in the region are intensifying. The collapse of the bridges in Bryansk, which struck a moving passenger train, raises questions about infrastructure stability amid ongoing military tensions. Footage from the site shows heavy trucks toppled onto the train tracks, a stark reminder of the risks posed by the ongoing conflict. The regional governor described the incident as devastating, and investigations are underway to determine whether sabotage or other factors contributed to the structural failures. This incident not only highlights the humanitarian toll of the ongoing war but also points to the potential vulnerabilities within Russia's own infrastructure, which has been strained by the demands of military logistics. In a broader geopolitical context, Putin's recent statements regarding Ukraine reflect a rigid stance that rejects compromises, further complicating peace negotiations. Analysts note that his approach appears to be driven by a desire to reaffirm Russia's territorial claims and influence in the region. Putin is showing that he is unwilling to negotiate unless his demands are met, which could lead to further instability, remarked a foreign policy expert, emphasizing the precariousness of the situation. The fallout from these events could be significant. If the U.S. and its allies respond with sanctions, it may further isolate Russia economically and diplomatically. However, such measures could also provoke retaliation from Moscow, potentially escalating military confrontations. The impact of sanctions on global markets is also a consideration, as energy prices remain sensitive to developments in Eastern Europe. As world leaders continue to monitor the situation, the potential for a diplomatic resolution seems increasingly remote. The international community is left grappling with the implications of a prolonged conflict, which could destabilize not only Ukraine but the entire region. Observers warn that without proactive measures and unified global action, the risk of further escalation remains high. In conclusion, as the geopolitical landscape shifts, the need for clear strategies and collaborative international efforts becomes ever more critical. The next few weeks will be pivotal in determining whether a peaceful resolution is achievable or if the world is destined to witness an intensifying conflict that could reshape the security dynamics of Europe and beyond. In a dramatic escalation of military activity between Ukraine and Russia, Ukraine has reportedly executed a large-scale drone attack that targeted military assets deep within Russian territory. This operation, which Ukrainian officials claim destroyed over 40 military aircraft, comes at a time when President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has announced the dispatch of a delegation to Istanbul for renewed peace talks with Russian representatives. The events mark a significant turning point in the ongoing conflict, showcasing both nations' military capabilities and their willingness to engage diplomatically despite the heightened hostilities. On Sunday, June 1, 2025, Zelenskyy confirmed via telegram that Defense Minister Rustem Umerov would lead the Ukrainian delegation to Istanbul. "We are doing everything to protect our independence, our state and our people," he asserted, indicating Ukraine's commitment to pursuing peace even amidst intense military operations. The timing of the talks is particularly poignant as they follow a devastating Russian missile strike that resulted in the deaths of at least 12 Ukrainian soldiers at a military training site. The drone attack, described as the largest of its kind since the onset of the war, involved the launch of 472 drones targeting various locations, including airfields in the Irkutsk region, which lies over 2,500 miles away from Ukraine. Reports from a Ukrainian security official suggest that the planning for this operation took over 18 months and was personally overseen by Zelenskyy. The attack was characterized by its strategic execution, with drones transported in containers to evade detection and deployed against key military installations, including the Belaya airbase. In contrast, Russian forces have intensified their strikes on Ukrainian positions, launching both drones and missiles. Yuri Ignat, spokesperson for Ukraine's Air Force, confirmed that the recent Russian assault featured a record number of drone launches, underscoring the escalating nature of the conflict. This surge in aerial attacks comes as Russian forces reportedly gained ground in the northern Sumy region, prompting Ukrainian officials to order mandatory evacuations in several settlements. The juxtaposition of Ukraine's drone offensive and Russia's missile strikes highlights the ongoing tit-for-tat military strategy both sides are employing. The Ukrainian army, grappling with manpower shortages, has been cautious to avoid mass formations that could become easy targets for the Russian drones that scour the skies. An internal investigation has been initiated to determine the circumstances that led to the high casualty rate during the recent missile strike on the training unit. As the situation unfolds, the potential for diplomatic resolution remains tenuous. Ukrainian officials have urged the Kremlin to present a memorandum outlining its position on a ceasefire prior to the Istanbul talks, while Russia has indicated it will share its stance during the negotiations. The effectiveness of these discussions remains uncertain given the backdrop of violence. The broader implications of these developments are significant not only for Ukraine and Russia but also for international observers and stakeholders. The ongoing conflict has drawn global attention, with nations weighing their responses to the shifting dynamics on the ground. As both sides prepare for the upcoming talks, the delicate balance between military action and diplomatic engagement will be closely scrutinized. Looking ahead, the outcome of the Istanbul talks may shape the future course of the conflict. The prospect of a ceasefire, albeit challenging, offers a glimmer of hope for a resolution to the hostilities that have gripped the region for years. However, the recent military escalations suggest that both parties remain committed to asserting their strategic interests, making the path to peace fraught with complexity. As the world watches, the actions taken in the coming days will be pivotal in determining whether a lasting settlement can be achieved.